Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Cyber Risk Update for Community Associations webinar. I'm your host, Sherry Branson. I'm now joined by Kevin Davis, the president of Kevin Davis Insurance, and Kevin joins me now from Los Angeles. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Sherry.
Hey,
Hey, how you doing?
good. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Let me play around my volume here. I think it's too loud. Let's see
Oh,
here.
you can hear me loud and clear, huh?
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
There you go. That's better. Okay. How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. Doing great. Yeah, and
Um,
Kevin, we have a nice group of people with us today. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar. And we have a great goal today, Kevin. We're going to be doing an update that we haven't done in a little while.
yeah, it's time for a cyber update. And what we're going to really do is talk about the cyber related exposures for community association and why it's more important than ever for community association to have a cyber policy.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's really in the news. We're hearing all kinds of from our brokers and from various people, that people are concerned about it.
Yep, and it'll be 5 parts that we're going to talk about. The first part is the research that was completed by CAI recently on cyber-related issues. It was presented by FAR, FCAR, which is the Foundation of Community Association Research, where they interviewed 600 community association managers and board members and industry professionals. The second thing is we're going to discuss the cyber exposures identified from that report from these people. We also talk about something we haven't talked about in a while, how state laws, reporting requirements impact community associations. And we're going to look at the national data that CAI put out in terms of what the community associations look like today. And then we're going to talk about how purchasing cyber insurance can save you time, money, and your association reputation.
Absolutely.
That's our topic for today.
Okay, those are our main goals. Great. And I did want to tell everybody that if you have a question during today's webinar, there are 2 ways you can ask questions. You can type a question in the question box on your screen, and if we have time, we'll get to your question at the end of the webinar. If not, we'll answer you afterwards. Or you can email them to me at sbranson@kdins.com, and you can also get a copy of our PowerPoint presentation from today's webinar. So thank you very much. Take it away, Kevin.
All right, so let's start with, I just happened to Google, hack condo association or something like that. I forgot what the exact was, but this one came out. Okay, it's interesting. A property management company in Florida had his computer server stolen. Okay, so somebody actually walked into the management company and stole their server. The police said that the stolen server contained homeowners' names, bank accounts, and routing numbers.
Oh, that's incredible. So they got everything, Kevin.
Exactly. And according to the police report, the owner of the management company found out when she one day couldn't log in. She tried to get into her server, couldn't log in, and bam, she found out the server was gone.
Wow.
She also told the police that the front door of the business was unlocked. A couple of times that happened in less than a month.
Oh, so this person had been staking them out or looking for the server probably.
Yeah. So the management company did the right thing. They sent a letter out saying they were victims of a burglary. They immediately notified law enforcement, and they started notifying the board of directors and really dealt with the situation pretty good, again, from what I read in there.
Absolutely. That's scary. I mean, a server, we hardly ever look at servers. You're usually in a back room or in a closet somewhere, and we don't really think about them until all of a sudden you can't connect, and then, that
And
happens.
just think how easy it is for somebody to walk into your company and say they're exterminator or IT specialist or UPS person, walk past the server and just pick the thing up and walk out, or put a thumb drive in there, and now all of a sudden your whole system is locked.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're talking about today, Sherry. This is the problem. This is the number one problem that community associations have today, is when that management company loses that very valuable person identifiable information.
Absolutely. And Kevin, a lot of large corporations out there, this is a management company in Florida, which, it could be a small office. We don't know how large they are. But, large corporations have lots of IT and lots of security, and they still get hacked.
Yeah. Hackers know what to look for. They know where to look for it, and too often they know the weak links that's in the system and exactly how to exploit it.
Hmm. And you got a call from Hawaii, I believe, this week, didn't you? Somebody called you from Hawaii about.
Exactly. I got a call just 2 days ago from a lawyer that said something very similar happened where association lost their information and didn't know what to do. So first thing I did was recommend again attend this webinar. So we're going to see this thing more and more and more. And again, what's happening in community associations is just becoming too easy for cyber criminals to get access to this information. They know how to trick people into giving them fraudulent information. They know how to download viruses and malware and send sensitive data out. So right now today, cyber insurance for community associations and other small companies are very important. You got to have it.
Hmm. Absolutely. And what does the cyber policy protect, Kevin? If somebody
Okay.
gets a cyber policy, what are they protecting with it?
Again, what they really worry about, they have to protect the personal identifiable information, that very valuable information, not only from the unit owners who live there, but you got renters, they have contractors, the managers, you got other board members, you have people who come in and may just drop their driver's license there. So they have to protect that very valuable information. They have a duty to protect it, come to think of it, and they have to understand, they have a duty to understand it and be responsible for it. And one final thing, Sherry, it cannot be delegated to a property manager or an employee. It's the responsibility of the board of directors.
Okay, so that's a key point, Kevin. That's a very, very key point. And now, if the board finds out there is a cybersecurity issue, then they have to decide what to do with that, right?
And that's the key thing. If they choose to ignore it or not handle it correctly, they can be fines or penalties with non-disclosure information.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if they disclose it too soon, let's say they get hacked and they just send an email, blanket email out, we've been hacked, just wanting to notify everybody else, then there's a potential for significant damage to the community association's reputation, right?
Exactly, because it has to be done a certain way. And that's what we're going to get into. We're going to get into the laws, everything that really respond to this so that we can make sure our community associations are handling correctly. And if they don't, again, they have backup with insurance.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. They have that protection. Okay. And Kevin, earlier in the beginning, you mentioned the research completed by the FCAR, which is the Foundation for Community Association Research. Can you explain to everybody what that is?
Sure. And I'm very fortunate because I happen to be part of something called the Foundation for Community Association Research. It's a think tank in Washington, D.C., and part of CAI. And while last meeting we talked about, we wanted to conduct research on cyber-related issues.
Okay.
So what they put together was all kinds of questionnaires to 600 community association managers, board members, and professionals to examine the risk and liabilities when using technology to conduct association business.
Okay. And what was the goal of that, Kevin?
Sure. They wanted to collect information, develop guidelines that will help community association leaders, I'm talking about the volunteers, management, and employees, to make better decisions from the use of social media, community association websites, and these third-party payment portals that they've been using.
Okay. And what did they, now on the report, looking at it, the cybersecurity concerns, what did they find, Kevin?
Okay. Now, this is interesting, okay? What we looked at was there's like 7 or 8 really major concerns that the report demonstrated. Most of them around 3 or 4 things. Number one, we're talking about theft or misappropriation of association funds, improper storage or destruction of association records. That was the most important, and that was a big one.
Oh, interesting. Now, when you say records, what comes to mind is, we automatically, because we're talking about cyber, we think about computer records or online records, but actually a lot of associations still keep paper records, and they've had them for years. And basically, they may not, hopefully they're shredded, but you don't know if they've been shredded. And sometimes people, there's personal information in those files too, Kevin.
Yeah, that's the problem too. A lot of times you think about these property managers who get access to these files. They never destroy them. Some probably stuck inside some file cabinet somewhere in some basement someplace for years and years and years. If there's a loss, because based on those information that's 10, 15, 20 years old, guess what? You have to notify by law.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one area. Another area is communication among board members and residents. Is really concerned. They're concerned about things like defamation, or releasing sensitive information out, or very, very private information. So communication is an issue.
Mhm.
I think overall, when we view the information, the big problem is the overall lack of cybersecurity. Talking about things like adequate password protection, a lack of training to board members and managers about the use of technology. I mean, that seems to be what it really boils down to.
What people are most concerned about. Sure. And, I live in an HOA, Kevin, and, the board of directors, they're not really, they have meetings, but then they're not actively engaged really with the day-to-day operation of the association. So, we have a lot of turnover and stuff like that. And, sometimes they don't really take responsibility, or they don't look at it as a job, Kevin. They just kind of look at it like it's something fun to do.
Yeah, and I tell you, you mentioned turnover, and turnover issues have been one of the big things that came up out of this report. Talking about not only at the manager level, but at the board level. And what happened is because of turnover, you have things like sloppiness in resetting passwords, signature cards, lack of proper procedures. All these different things are the result of this turnover we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be simple as these monthly board packets and the complex not being handled correctly. Because you got key board members who may get that information, and then that information may include personal identifiable information. It could be spreadsheets containing this information. Again, if it's not handled correctly, if they don't understand what they're doing, now all of a sudden you push the wrong button and it sends out to everybody in your community association, and it should only go to the board of directors.
Sure, yeah, stuff like that can happen all the time. You just send it to the wrong person, or it's a very common mistake. And Kevin, earlier you mentioned state laws, and I know they're changing all the time, right? And it's really important for an HOA to be aware, and the property manager to be aware of what their state laws are. But how do they impact community associations in this situation?
Sure. It's interesting. I did this a couple of years ago, and now for this year, as of end of March, all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands have enacted legislation requiring private or government entities to notify individuals of security breaches of information involving personal identifiable information.
Okay, so there's been some big changes then, Kevin.
Yeah, let me give you an example of one. In California, it's called SB 24. If you live in California, you got to be aware of this. It requires notification, including a description of the incident, the type of personal identifiable information breached, the time of the breach, the toll-free number and address of a credit reporting agency. In addition, this SB 24 requires the breached business send an electronic copy of the notification to the California Attorney General's office.
Okay, so it's pretty specific then, Kevin.
Yeah, because let's go back to that stolen server. Let's say it was in California, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And now we know personal identifiable information is missing, bank accounts, routing numbers. So by law, something has to be done. And in California, it's pretty specific.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now, Kevin, what about, I know I'm thinking of just this hypothetical situation. You live in New Jersey and you have a condo in Florida, mm-hmm. and you're on the board, you're back up in New Jersey for the summer, let's say, with your laptop, and you're a board member, and you get hacked.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, because you may have to apply for New Jersey law and state law. And the same thing can happen. Let's say you're a manager in New Jersey and you're happening to manage associations in New York City. Mm-hmm. So do you comply with New Jersey law, or you comply with New York law? Those are things you have to know in order to make sure you do your job correctly. Because, again, it's not as simple as notifying people in California. If you happen to live in Nevada, you have to follow those laws. And, again, as you can see by this California law, they can be pretty specific.
Absolutely. So you have to know both laws if you're dealing with two states, if you're present in two states. That makes sense. And now, Kevin, regarding national data on community associations, why is that important, do you think?
Okay. Now, this is interesting. This is some of the data, some of the information that was shown by CAI recently. CAI published this recently. Basically, there are 342,000 community associations in the United States. Half of them are in Florida, California, Texas, Illinois, North Carolina, New York. 342,000.
Wow.
There are $88 billion in assessment collected from homeowners.
Wow. I mean, assessments they do everything from pay for the professional management, the managers, utilities, security, insurance, the common area maintenance. I mean, it really pays for a lot of things at the association.
And you got $25 billion in reserve funds.
Wow. Okay, so $25 billion. That's a lot of money, Kevin. That's paying for the repair, replacement, enhancement of things like replacing roofs, resurfacing streets, repairing swimming pools and elevators, just to name a few.
Exactly. Then you have 6,000 to 9,000 large-scale management associations, so large-scale associations with a minimum annual budget of $2 million.
Okay, so
6,000 to 9,000.
there's some big ones out there.
7,000 to 8,000 community association management companies, 95,000 to 100,000 individuals employed by management companies, 2 million community association board members, committee members, and 80 million hours of services annually. Okay.
Okay, those are some big numbers.
Yes. So now what does this all mean? Okay. What it means is that the hackers and cyber criminals have access to a large amount of money overseen by people who lack the knowledge to protect the association's funds.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin, this makes them prime targets for cybercrime.
Yeah. The major problem for community association board members is, again, they're made up of volunteers.
Okay, that's right, Kevin. These are volunteers that really don't have a lot of experience. You know, they don't really have any training. They just volunteer for the job, and you know, they're managing a big business, really.
Exactly. And most community associations turn over handling all these funds, even a reserve account, which should never happen, to their independent property manager, again, with very little oversight.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And another problem is a lot of at least in my HOA, a lot of the board members treat it like a hobby or a social club. You know, they're talking about a movie they saw that weekend, and they don't really take it very seriously at all.
Yeah. And again, we're talking about cybercrime, and cybercrime is looking at people like that. You know, if you happen to serve on the board of directors of condominium, you have to treat it like it is, like a major corporation. You got to remember, if you have 100 units, and the average value is 100,000, then the associations manage a $10 million corporation. That's important.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, and I don't think a lot of them realize that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And now, Kevin, you mentioned earlier property managers and management company, and you know, having them handle the reserves or information, of course, for the association. Now, what if an association has outsourced its data, you know, its information on its homeowners, and there's a breach? What happens then?
Now, this is important because, again, for community association board of directors, they have to understand that even if they turn over their data, like assessment collection, out to the management companies or a bank, they feel they're no longer responsible. The person who owns the system may not be the same person who owns the data. For the community association, it's their data. They're responsible. So if the management company's system, the cloud or the bank, or the server is gone, if it's missing, it's the community association's obligation to notify the unit owners of the breach.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So even though, now, it's interesting, they have to work together, the management company and the association, because the management companies are agents of the insured and have a very tight indemnification agreement. So they may end up having to pay for it anyway. The board may have to pay for it anyway, even though it's responsibility of the management company because they're the one that lost the server.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. And we're at the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please type them in the question box, or you can email them to me at sbranson@kdins.com, and we'll answer your questions now, or we'll get to them later. And let's see, I don't see any questions that have come in, but if you think of any along the way, feel free to type them in, and we will get back to you. And now, Kevin, are there different types of cyber insurance policies that you can talk about?
Sure. Let's talk about the cyber policy now, because this is what we really want to talk about, is the cyber policy. Now, first of all, there's no such thing as a standard cyber policy. They're constantly changing because of the complicated nature of cyber exposures. You know, some, you know, you can find it packaged in the D&O policy, or you might get some coverages in the property liability policy. But again, it's very restricted coverage, and usually do not provide the coverage that they need. A standalone cyber policy is the answer, and one really should be designed for community associations because the property manager is the one handling a lot of the data. It should respond to the property manager. It should be included in the policy.
Mm-hmm. That's very important. That's a key point. It should extend to the property managers. Great. Mm-hmm. And now, Kevin, let's start with the policy itself. Can you talk about the policy a little bit?
Yeah. Now, this is interesting because when we talk about a cyber policy, it combines first-party, third-party coverages, provides coverage for fines and penalties, which you can't find coverage for that, and also we have something new called extortion coverage. We'll talk about a little bit later, and they have a whole assortment of crime coverages, all designed to make sure you have the maximum protection for cyber-related exposures.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when we talk about cyber coverages, there are two exposures that need to be addressed. The first is the loss of data that you get when somebody hacks a system. The other involves money, the loss of funds. When somebody gets into the system and they actually force them wire transfer fraud, wire transfer money away, or computer theft money. So you're talking about the theft of funds and the theft of data. So the first part we're talking about with the cyber policy is the theft of data. Now, when we talk about that, you're talking about two liability coverages. The first one is network and information security liability. And the second one is regulatory defense. Okay, now, sounds like a big, complicated thing, but it's not.
Okay.
When you talk about network and information security liability, all that means is one simple thing. You are being sued for the failure to prevent unauthorized access to data.
Okay.
It provides a defense.
Okay, can you give us an example, Kevin, of that?
Sure. We go back to a situation where the management lost the server. Server is gone. Okay? All right? Now, all of a sudden, the homeowner files a lawsuit against the HOA and the property manager for the failure to prevent unauthorized access to the data. Simple as that.
Okay.
So it's a lawsuit, and now all of a sudden, a defense is provided.
Okay.
The second one we talk about regulatory defense expense. Pretty simple. It provides fines and penalties imposed by the governmental claim due to breach not handled correctly. So if you go to the state attorney general's office and they're saying, we don't like the way you handled it, guess what? We're going to fine you $10,000 or $100,000. It pays for the fines and penalties.
So those are, there can be some big fines there, Kevin.
Now, the next one is crisis management event expense. That is pretty simple. A public relations firm is hired to restore confidential information in the HOA and property management company. That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Mitigate publicity.
Okay, great. And an example of that, Kevin, would be like if a public relations firm was hired to restore confidence in the homeowners association and the property manager, and to kind of help, lower the negative publicity or the negative reputation of the HOA from this incident, right?
It pays the expense. That's exactly what it does. It just pays the expense.
Okay.
Now, the next coverage is the most important coverage. This is what they're talking about, and that is the security breach remediation and notification expense. Very, very important.
Okay, that's a long topic. But can you explain that?
All it does is all the notification expenses related, meaning the credit monitoring, the fraud expenses, reimbursement, the call center, all that stuff.
Okay.
It's all the expenses associated with the notification.
Okay. And after, I was a victim of a hack a few years ago, and we received credit monitoring, free credit monitoring, etc. We had a call center to call. So this is a really good thing, a very good thing to have, and it's important, very important, to save the reputation of the company. And now, Kevin, I know there's a coverage that's fairly new called e-commerce extortion. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. When we talk about e-commerce extortion, it is now the cyber criminals are using ransomware to take money from business. Actual ransomware.
Okay.
And what ransomware is a type of malware, a computer virus that prevents users from accessing files and data on their computers, their laptops, their iPads, and threatens to delete all that information if the ransom is not paid.
Oh, and Kevin, it just happened just very recently in Atlanta. The city of Atlanta was a victim, and I think they had to pay something like $2 million. $2
million, exactly. Yep.
And now,
and what they do is kind of simple, is that they attach a virus to it, okay? And you'll see a sign, just like we're seeing right down the computer, that your computer has been locked. It's done. And when you ever see an email like that, or you see something pop up on your computer, you know you're in trouble. Your files have been all encrypted, and you have no access to it. You need a key in order to get back, get out of that situation.
And I know it happened to a hospital too, right, Kevin?
Yes. And what happened was, it's interesting because they end up paying, I think, like $17,000, and I think it was 40 Bitcoins back then, but I don't know what 40 Bitcoins get you these days.
No, probably 17 cents.
Yeah, yeah, they don't have the value of
Wasn't much
what's
of a ransom. Wasn't much of a ransom.
In fact, I think the Atlanta thing, they end up paying $2 million in cash. I think the whole Bitcoin thing kind of didn't work out for them.
Now the hackers are getting smarter. They want cash. They don't want Bitcoins.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, so when we talk about this e-commerce coverage, because it's really, really important, because I think it's going to be really big for community associations. Okay. It provides reimbursement for a ransom payment and related expense. Now, the key is you have to obtain permission from your insurance provider before paying a claim. You got to do that.
Okay, so you can't negotiate on your own.
Exactly, because what can happen, that sign can come up, and all of a sudden there might be a little X in the corner you can exit out, or you may have backup. So you got to be able to get permission first.
Mhm.
So when you get the coverage, okay, it covers three things. It covers monies paid to meet the extortion demand, the cost of hiring computer security experts to prevent further extortion attempts, and the expenses to charge to deal and negotiate the cyber terrorists or cyber extortionists.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah. Now, the key to coverage for this, okay, is a definition of the computer system. The association computer system must be a device that's under the direct operational control of the community association. In other words, it does not extend to personal devices.
Okay, so if I'm a board member and I take my laptop and it happens to me, I get ransomware and everything is frozen, then that wouldn't be covered.
Yes, exactly. That's important to understand. This covers the server, okay? If you live in a community association and you have a server, you should have e-commerce extortion. Because the e-commerce extortion, somebody comes in and walks out of their server, and obviously you have people want to get into the pool because electronic and it doesn't work, or get into the front gate or get into any gate. That's why you need this coverage. Because once that happens, once you're locked out, it's locked out. And I think our first claim was an e-commerce extortion claim, and the coverage wasn't available back then. So coverage is available now. You need to look into it.
Okay. Okay, great. And I did want to mention again that if anybody has any questions about what we're going over, please send an email to sbranson@kdins.com, or you can type your question into the question box. And one other thing, I record all of our webinars, and I put them up on our website, which is kdisonline.com, if you'd like to listen to it again.
Okay, let's do a quick recap on what we've been talking about here.
Okay.
Okay. Again, it's interesting. This is our first update. And since then, since our last time we've done these cyber, there was no claims. Now we're seeing more and more of this, and we believe that you're going to start seeing more cyber-related claims in community association. We're going to see e-commerce extortion. We're going to see actual theft of the data information. We're going to see it. We're going to see servers being stolen, and we're going to see situations where it will. And the main reason why, because again, the easier and easier to access this kind of information, and harder to get access to people who really understand the exposure. So when we talk about the coverage itself, we're talking about first and third party liability coverage. Okay. We're talking about extends to property management coverage. We're talking about regulatory coverage. And then on the crime policy, we're talking about things like computer theft, wire transfer fraud, and social engineering coverage. If you have a crime policy, you have to make sure there's social engineering coverage in your crime. There's nothing more important than knowing about social engineering and crime coverages. Okay?
Okay.
Social engineering is the manipulation of an employee into providing confidential information for the purpose of committing fraud or gaining access to the system by fraudulent means.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay. I tell you what, let me give one example of that, one quick example, because we run out of time. A board member sent an email asking a manager to forward a payment to a different bank. The payment was made. The manager realized that the email was not from the board member. The email sender the email sender tricked that person to purchasing airline tickets. The manager then realized the fraud and tried to cancel the tickets. So again, there's a lot of social engineering fraud that's happening out there. Make sure you're prepared for it, and make sure you have social engineering coverage under your crime policy.
Hmm. Absolutely. There's a lot of different types of crime that can happen on the computer with ransomware and social engineering and e-commerce extortion. So there's a lot, if you have more questions about this, please send an email or ask a question in the question box. Hmm.
Yeah, we will come up with, we'll probably have a crime, whole cyber crime coverage, probably or our next webinar. Yeah, I think it's probably time to do that. We probably should save that for the next one.
Okay, great.
Okay?
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. And I did want to mention that with a cyber risk policy with Kevin Davis Insurance, you get a 30-minute breach coach if there is actually a breach. And so that person will help answer any questions, regarding data breaches, et cetera, protecting your information. And thank you, Kevin, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of today's presentation, please send an email to sbranson@kdins.com. And I put a recording of today's webinar on our website with all of our past recordings on D&O, crime, umbrella, etc. at kdisonline.com. So please listen to it again.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Take care.